The Boston Bruins are in Tempe, Arizona to take on the Coyotes in a Friday night tilt. And Zdeno Chara is telling tales about the 2011 Vancouver Canucks and how they motivated the Bruins with some early celebration planning. Let's get into it on today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Friday, December 9th, and I want to thank you for making Locked On Bruins your first listen every day, free and available wherever you get podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before at BetOnline, where the game starts. The Bruins in action tonight at Arizona. We're going to preview that game as well as talk about Zdeno Chara's revelations about the 2011 Stanley Cup Final against the Vancouver Canucks. I want to remind you first that you can follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Locked NHL Bruins, and you can find me, my dad jokes, and hockey tweets at Ian C. McLaren, a lifelong Bruins fan, covering this team for various outlets for about 17 years now. Is it more than that? No, 17. Yep. Anyways, tonight, the Bruins take on the Arizona Coyotes, and before we get to talking about the players involved in this one, wild to me that the Coyotes, this will be their 25th game of the season, but only their 5th game at home. They're 6-11-3 on the road, 20 games of their 24 played on the road, 1-2-1 at home. And of course, this season, they're playing at Mullett Arena, a 5,000-seat indoor multi-purpose arena at Arizona State University in Tempe, Arizona. It's the home of the Arizona State men's and women's hockey teams, women's gymnastics, men's wrestling, and it's the temporary venue for the Arizona Coyotes through at least 2025. This is where an NHL team is playing, a 5,000-seat arena. Temporary locker room accommodations were set up for the first 4 home games. There's been some time now where the Bruins will get a legit locker room situation. They have just ended a franchise record 14-game road trip while construction of the locker room annex has been going on. It's expected to be completed by tonight's game. Included on-site NHL training and locker room facilities. So the season began with the arena not even quite ready to host the Coyotes and their opponents, but reportedly that is to be finished by the time the Bruins check in for tonight's game. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure. It was scheduled to be ready before their homestand, which begins tonight against the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins will be getting a Coyotes team that has been on the road for quite some time. They've played 14 straight games on the road, coming home to newly renovated digs at least, and the Bruins will have a chance to play in a very intimate setting. For reference, I live in a junior hockey town, Guelph, Ontario. The OHL's Guelph Storm that features Boston Bruins second round pick Matt Poitras, of course. We are in a town of about 120,000 people, and the capacity at the Sleeman Center is about 5,000 people. So that gives you kind of the scope of where the Bruins will be playing tonight, the equivalent of a junior hockey rink in a small Ontario city. It should make for some interesting viewing. The atmosphere there, I'm sure, would be great. I mean, my 7-year-old kid just last weekend played a few games at the Sleeman Center. You can get very close to the ice. The top seats are like some of the best seats that you would find at any other arena around the NHL. So very intimate and should make for interesting viewing at the very least. Coming up here in a moment, we'll preview this game and talk about some of the Coyotes players who are hot coming into it, the Bruins, and then later on we'll touch on the Zdeno Chara and the Vancouver Canucks situation. But first, this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the top spot for all your sports betting information here in 2022. They have everything you could possibly need to make your bets on the World Cup of Soccer, this weekend's football schedule, basketball, hockey, esports. They've got it all at BetOnline. Every professional and amateur league, the latest odds and trends. They're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix in. You can head to their website today, use your mobile device to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. So who are these Arizona Coyotes? Who do they have? Who's hot for them? Who has helped them win 7 games in their first 24? For reference, they are 7th in the Central Division, 7-13-4 record, just a touch better than the Chicago Blackhawks, higher point percentage, and a better goal differential than the Blackhawks. In the Western Conference, the Coyotes are 14th out of 16 with the Anaheim Ducks well down the standings as the bottom team in the NHL at the moment, in the running for the Connor Bedard sweepstakes. When it comes to their top scorers, well, over the last 5 games, they've had a rookie step up, leading the team in points. That would be Matias Maccelli, who was a 4th-round pick back in 2019 out of Finland. He's got 2 goals, 15 assists for 17 points in 22 games this season, 6 points over his last 5 games. Shane Gostisbehere leading the team over the past 5 games with 2 goals. Maccelli with the 5 assists. Goaltending-wise, they have a pretty talented netminder in Karel Vajmelka. He was a 5th-round pick of the Nashville Predators back in 2015. 912 save percentage for the Coyotes this season. He's 6-7-3, and he certainly can steal a game or two for the Arizona Coyotes. He's got 2 shutouts this season, and again, he's a guy that could very well make 50 saves and earn a victory for the Coyotes. In fact, he shut out the Carolina Hurricanes earlier this season, shut out the Islanders, not as impressive, but that one against the Hurricanes, he made 36 saves in that one. He's got a 39 save performance earlier this season, 41 save performance in a win over the Florida Panthers earlier this season. He beat the Maple Leafs earlier this season, making 26 saves in that game. So again, he's a guy that could very well step up and steal a game for the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes led in scoring by Clayton Keller, 24 games played, 22 points. Shane Gostisbehere with 18 points. Our old friend Nick Ritchie, of course, still hanging around in Arizona. He's got 6 goals in 21 games. They also recently got Nick Schmaltz back from injury. Had a hot start, but he's cooled off since his return, only 4 points in 5 games. This team has some players who can put the puck in the back of the net. Just a very weird team with their arena situation and with their rebuilding. They're always taking on bad contracts, etc. They've got a bunch of guys who could indeed be floated at the deadline in terms of trade acquisitions and loading up for the draft. It's insane if you look at their draft picks over the next couple of years, 2024 especially. They have 3 second-round picks, 4 third-round picks, a couple 4th-round picks, and they have Boston's 7th-round pick next year as a result of the Michael Callahan trade, where the Bruins acquired the rights to the defenseman and sent that 2024 7th-round pick. The one they're most concerned about is this year's 2023 first-round pick, which could indeed turn into Connor Bedard. Rookie Dylan Guenther won't be with the team. He's off to a pretty good start in his NHL career with 11 points in 21 games, but he's been loaned to Team Canada for the World Junior Tournament. So, again, a team that kind of relies on their high-end talent to perform every single night without one of their top rookies. Jacob Chychrun will be in the lineup. He's a guy that's always been linked in trade rumors. A guy that I will admit I was a bit higher on in his draft year than Charlie McAvoy. That's probably my OHL bias coming into play. But he, is a high-end defenseman. Hasn't panned out as well as Charlie McAvoy, of course, but still somebody to keep an eye on. And, of course, our old friend Nick Ritchie will be looking to make an impact for the Coyotes. It's a 9:30 p.m. start, so, it is a Friday night. Hopefully you can sleep in tomorrow so you can enjoy tonight's game. I have to get up in order to take my kid to basketball tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. So, could be a bit dicey. The Bruins will be off tomorrow, back in action on Sunday against the Vegas Golden Knights. So I might pop on and do a quick bonus podcast to talk about tonight's game in advance of Sunday night's game. Coming up here after the break, a wild story about Zdeno Chara and the 2011 Stanley Cup Final. But I want to thank you once again for making Locked On Bruins part of your day, free and available wherever you get podcasts, including YouTube. For your next listen, check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories of the day, instant reactions, big game recaps, the take of the day, available on YouTube and wherever you get podcasts. So Zdeno Chara's been in the spotlight a bit over the past week, playing in the Boston Bruins alumni game with Ray Bourque, and he recently appeared on the Games with Names podcast, an interview with Julian Edelman and Sam Morrow. He made some very interesting comments about the 2011 Stanley Cup Final and how the Canucks motivated the Bruins by prematurely believing that they were on their way to victory in that series. Chara says that Canucks players began practicing how they would celebrate winning the Stanley Cup after winning their first 2 games in Vancouver. Those 2 games, if you will recall, were incredibly close. And in games 3 and 4, the Bruins blew out the Canucks by a combined score of 12-1. Canucks won game 5 in Vancouver, 1-0. They lost game 6 in Boston, and then of course the Bruins won 4-0 in game 7. This is what Chara had to say. After losing 2 games in Vancouver, the Bruins saw players from Vancouver coming on the ice in the Garden, and they were actually practicing how they would be lifting the cup and handing off the cup to each other. We found out about these things, and we were like, bleep this. We're not going to allow this to happen. It just fueled us. There's more. Chara said they heard about a few other things. There were some rumors that they called the league and they were asking, likely after game 5, they were calling the league and asking how many people or family members they can take on the ice after they win the championship. The Bruins found out about these things, and for them it was a huge, huge motivation. It's unclear who actually saw the Canucks players pretending to hand the cup to each other. Chara initially said, we saw. Then he said, we found out about it. Practice is open to the media. Didn't seem like there were any reports of such things happening at the time, but there was prevalent talk among fans and media at the time that this had actually happened. Openly pretending to lift the cup would be just ridiculous behavior for, hockey players who are super superstitious, don't even want to touch the conference championship trophies. If you're up 2-0, incredibly premature, but both sides hated each other, and if they saw this, caught wind of it, then it's something that they would have clearly latched onto. Chara was asked if the Canucks were a dirty team. Chara has struggled to find the right words. He said, I wouldn't say dirty. They were maybe a little bit too cocky. Not the right word, but they had a chip on their shoulders. They had some players that had a reputation of being role players and agitators, not really backing up the way they played. But they were good players, and they did some stuff that really fueled us. Of course, there was the Aaron Rome hit on Nathan Horton. There was the Alex Burrows finger bite of Patrice Bergeron. Now, from the Canucks side of things, Sportsnet's Jeff Merrick reached out to ex-Canucks defenseman Kevin Bieksa. He signed a one-day contract to retire with the team earlier this year, and Bieksa said, never happened, 100% never happened. Regardless, there's still some bad blood between the two sides. If you'll recall, Ryan Kessler, who was a prominent member of the 2011 team, said in an interview about 3 years ago that he's still not over and something he'll never forget. He said, after that 2011 year, it affects you mentally. It affects you personally. He remembered coming back to the rink the next year, and all the memories from Game 7 came back to you. Hard walking into that arena because every time you stepped in, you always get that Game 7 loss back in your head. Now, the Bruins, of course, have their own Game 7 at-home heartbreak to deal with back in 2019. And their play this season at TD Garden suggests the guys who have remained have been able to wipe that out, looking forward to this year's playoffs where they can hopefully write a better story this year. Anyways, fun little story there from Zdeno Chara. And that 2011 series, I'll never forget it. As long as I live, I will never forget that Game 7 win. We had a infant at the time who was peacefully sleeping in his crib when the Bruins won. So I went outside. We lived in a basement apartment at the time with a separate entrance, so I opened the sliding door, went out into the backyard, and literally like got on my knees and raised my hands in victory. I was just so happy, and I'll never forget that feeling as long as I live, and I hope that we get to experience that again very soon. Anyways, that's it for this week's episodes of Locked On Boston Bruins. I might jump on over the weekend to talk about tonight's game against the Coyotes. It's a busy weekend around here. I mentioned basketball. We're also hosting, I don't know, a few dozen people for an extended early Christmas family gathering. Tis the season. Family gathering each of the next 3 Saturdays before Christmas, and then we're actually going to Ottawa on Boxing Day. I hope you're all doing well, taking care of yourselves, taking care of each other, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you again here soon on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your favorite team every single day.